the recording, Rebecca? Okay. So it's 6:02, November 30th, 2021. I call this meeting of the Wellfleet Select Board to order in accordance with the temporary suspension and enhancement of the open meeting law as allowed by the General Court of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. First order of business is announcements, open session, and public comments. Public comments must be brief, and the board will not deliberate or vote on any matter raised solely during announcements and public comments. Are there any? Okay, so on to committee updates. So Rights of Public Access Committee on the layout of the road used to access the Lieutenant Island Boathouse area. Let's see, so Melissa, are you presenting this or?
You're on mute, Melissa.
I haven't had a chance to speak to our committee. John and Barbara, do you know if there was a plan?
So what I could do is
I unmuted them. John, do you want to comment?
Well, we discussed at some length earlier today the legal issues having to do with the Aggers lot, but that was the extent of the discussion.
okay. So Melissa, can you just brief the board on what some of the concerns are with this road?
So it looks like, based on this map, which comes from the assessor's database, that most of the paper road is where the dirt road is. But if you pull up Oliver, it shows the dirt road on the Audubon property, which would be southeast of the paper road. And we think that might have implications for what kind of rights we have to actually pass by the dirt road, and where we go from there. So securing rights to the paper road might not necessarily guarantee us access across the dirt road, but we do need access across the paper road in order to guarantee rights to pass across the dune trail that begins at the turnaround in the circle. So it's not clear where the actual road is, and I think our committee has discussed needing a surveyor to figure that out first.
Okay, Janet?
Well, this is kind of along my question is, I don't know if you have the ability, if Rebecca's still on, to like use an arrow to say where the area is exactly, like, is the paper road the dotted line in the green area? The dirt road is obviously the beigey brown area, but yeah, if you could distinguish a little more clearly for me what we're talking about. Thank you.
Okay, so this is the roadway for Heron Point Road, at least according to this map. There's other maps that show it in a slightly different location in relation to where the roadway actually is. There's also the driveways. Melissa, can you talk about the driveways as well, and that road?
I'm not sure what you mean, but
so the driveways for these two houses here, where it comes down, and it's kind of separate.
It's confusing because these driveway where the black dotted line is the results of a survey from the early 2000s, and it seems like the black dotted lines show these driveways accurately, but it doesn't appear to show the real road accurately. So we're not sure if the road has moved or what, or even how that could happen.
Okay, and so I guess to town council, what would you recommend as to a way to approach this? This is a private road currently as well.
Yeah. Yes, it is a private road. I would recommend a survey. I'm not sure what is superimposed on what I assume is basically a GIS map. I assume that's the assessor's map. Is that correct? Or I mean, orange lines, the actual lines.
It's not necessarily the assessor's map. This is from GIS.
Okay, then I do think it does need to be resolved. If the road is actually on Mass Audubon property, that needs to be established, or it looks like maybe portions of the road and not all of the road. On the other hand, even if, we are assuming it's a private way, but we know it's, I think we're certain it's a private way, but I guess the issue is if a private way is on, there may be rights to use it by prescription and maybe not, needing to put it, take it off the Mass Audubon land. I don't think I was aware that the road was partially on Mass Audubon land. I knew the cul-de-sac was. Or at least where the parking area is. But yes, I would recommend something more precise than this.
Yep. And then Charlie,
Yes,
how would the town approach this?
well, clearly, we don't have a lot of money lying around to do special projects. So at the very least, we're going to have to go to town meeting and appropriate some money to conduct this work. I just don't think there's, I don't have a lot of knowledge, but I don't think there's a lot of capacity anywhere to do it prior to that.
Okay. Janet?
So I'd also like you to distinguish what is the Audubon land, and along with what Charlie's saying, which I think to start this off, I would really like to know what the desire, purpose, who this would benefit, how many people, because it's just like how many, if this is to give access to shellfish people rather than townspeople for a beach, like how many people would benefit? And I think that's where we've got to go with the cost of this to get it surveyed and then possibly maintain it or bulldoze it, and keep it clean. So all of that's Audubon land. And do they use it, or is it it's just purely for natural habitat, right?
The Audubon land is purely natural habitat.
Okay. So I guess what's the goal here?
The goal is to establish a town landing at the agri property in order to secure access for everybody, not just shellfish fishermen. I think recreational shellfish fishermen use it. I think recreational fishermen use it. I think beachgoers use it.
Well, do you think, or do you know? So if we start spending money on something like that, we really need to get who wants to use it, who will use it. What's the cost benefit? That's what I'm asking.
I know that a variety of people use it. I don't know how widely
Yeah.
known it is, but
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Helen?
Yes, I'm looking at the assessor's map right now. It's in my lap, quite awkward. And this has already been surveyed initially by the Slade Associates, and I'm assuming that what's on our current database, for a surveyed assessor's map, is still using, with adjustments over time, of course, what was there. So it has been surveyed. The question is, and we know that anything that's in a paper road, in this case, is part of a subdivision, and whether or not it's used or not with actual traffic, that layout continues to exist legally. The question is, how do we get to use it for people that aren't part of that subdivision?
So I guess to town council, can you speak about the accuracy of assessors maps versus an actual survey?
Well, I'm familiar with the Slade. This is the Slade assessor's map, which purports to be a survey. Is that correct?
No,
This
it's just
is-
an assessor's map.
Right, but I think Slade did a little more work than some assessors do when they did the Wellfleet properties. Is that what we're referring to?
Yeah.
I mean, I can't see it right now, but
Yeah.
That's what Helen's referring to.
For you?
yeah, I mean, I'm familiar with the Slade's work in Wellfleet. I'm not saying, I don't necessarily agree that it constitutes the equivalent of a survey. Although I haven't seen the specific plan that you're referring to right now, that's being referred to right now.
Yeah, she's referring to just the assessor's maps as a survey.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, if this is a contentious issue, I would, which it may be, then I think you'd want to have something other than just the Slade work.
Okay. Mike?
I imagine this road has been used for this purpose to access this area of beach and what has always seemed like a landing to me since the road was laid out. I don't know how long ago. I mean, I'm sure it's been a long time. And I just wonder if by prescriptive easement, that's a sort of easier process. Maybe it's not. Maybe it involves, just using it until someone says you can't, and then claiming a prescriptive easement. And I guess the question is, can the town claim a prescriptive easement, or would it be the person actually using it through success? Because it can be carried through succession. So this is for Catherine Klein.
Yep.
A prescriptive easement carries through generationally, right? Like you don't have to have been the original one to start using it adversely. Like if it's been used adversely and notoriously for say 200 years for the same use, would that be something the town could sort of make a claim to, or would it have to be the individual that's actually using it?
No, the town can establish easements by prescription. And in this case, you wouldn't want an individual to do that. You would want the town to do it on behalf of the public. So it would, but the towns can absolutely acquire easements by prescription. I'm not sure if the select board has seen the letter that I wrote dated October 13th, where I address, some of these issues.
Yeah,
That
it
are
was
coming up.
provided to them, so.
Okay, so on page 4 of that letter, I talk about prescription. It's unusual and to establish a public way by prescription, but it certainly can be done. And you don't just announce that you have a prescriptive, a public way by right of prescription. You have to go to court to establish it.
Right. And is that because it's just generally easier to use a eminent domain taking and lay out a public way if the town wanted to do that?
Well, it depends on the circumstances. I mean, if you are if you have, if you think you have a good case for prescription, then that would be an easier route if you know, rather than appraising, you know, interests of people and compensating them if you were going to lay out a public way and, you know, take people's rights and having to compensate them. On the other hand, if you don't think you have a good case for prescription, then, you know, you would go the other route. It's certainly much more common now to lay out and, you know, accept roads.
So can you also speak to the reasonable use if the town did acquire a parcel along specifically this way, the reasonable use that you outlined in that letter as well?
Yeah, I mean, what the town is considering is, you know, acquiring this lot just north of lot 5, which doesn't appear to be labeled, but owned by, is it Aggers?
Yep.
Oh, okay, so, yep. And so if you have an express easement, in other words, if you're granted an easement by a deed, then your rights to use it are broad. If you have an easement by prescription, for instance, your rights to use that road are pretty much limited to what you have done historically. So in this case, one of the issues that I raised was the possibility that it might be easier legally to establish the rights of the fishermen, of the oyster fishermen, to use this way by, you know, to have a prescriptive rights, because that may be easier to prove to a court than maybe sporadic use by people using it for a beach. I think it all depends on the evidence that you have for a prescriptive easement. And also in terms of what is reasonable, if the town were to you know, sort of go beyond the confines of what, you know, the road had been used for, you know, in the past, that would probably be deemed not to be reasonable.
Okay, so, but in your letter, it seemed to say that if the town did acquire, you know, a parcel such as this one along the way, that, you know, it might be possible for the town to allow reasonable use of that parcel and
yeah, there is some support for that in the case law, and support for the position that the town may permit public use of the town landing subject to reasonable limitations. There's a case called, I believe it was Otis versus Bedell. And what the town did in that case was, in order to balance the interests of the town to use the road with the interests of the abutting, you know, the lots, in this case, southerly to the west and east of Heron Point Road, and consider such factors as the impact that travel would have, and need for parking, you know, that might be, you know, might accompany the use of the road.
Okay. Mike?
Oh, I didn't mean to have my hand up still.
Okay, Helen?
Yeah, so can you give us some sense of what the duration and the kind of expense that might be entered into if we did this either by, insisting on a prescriptive, thing or laying out the way, the different methods, sorry. Is there some reasonable way to let us know what kind of expense this might be, or is that just not possible? It's every case is different. Through you to Katie. Hi, Katie.
Hi, I think what it mostly depends on is what opposition you meet from the abutters. So if you went to, you would go to land court for this and submit a petition and set forth the, the historic use of the road and the, you have to establish, 20 years, but it sounds like, we've certainly, the town has certainly been using it for longer than that, but people's memories, would go back further than that, presumably. And you would establish that in a, a verified petition. And then if nobody contested it, then it would certainly, land court is very, very behind. So I would say it would take, I don't know, I wouldn't be surprised if it took well over a year. And if it was contested, it would take, considerably longer than that. And in terms of costs, I would say, a low cost of between 3,000 and 5,000 and a high cost, it's hard to say.
Ryan?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm going to wait and see if anybody else talks about this more, but Katie, previously in written determinations that you gave us, and thank you, abutters in this case would mean who? In other words, who are the abutters that might have standing to contest this?
Well, in this case, I think you have to assume what you need is access going from Lieutenant Island Road, which I don't believe you can see on this plan, but where it intersects, I think, with 3rd Street. Is that correct? So I think there are about 10 or 12 abutters. If my memory serves me correctly there. The other thing is there was some mention of some type of a Lieutenant Point Island Association, road association. And what I don't know is how active they are, what they do, whether or not they would become involved in this. Because obviously there are implications for the all of the private ways on the island. So they may, the association may have standing as well.
Ryan, I can answer the question about that, may I?
Go ahead.
Thank you. Katie, I go to their meetings every summer.
Oh, okay.
They said in passing that they aren't the fully registered according to the state neighborhood association, but they sure function like one, and they call themselves that. And they are concerned with every way on the island in many ways. They're actually a bunch of really good guys for the most part. And I just want to be sure I understood what you just said. On Heron Point Road, there are actually not that many lots that have frontage on it. And it goes directly into what's either Cliff Avenue or Pond Avenue. It's a little hard to tell, which one of those it goes into. It could be either. So you're saying just the ones along actual Heron Point Road would be abutters, or everybody all the way to where they could reach a public way?
I intended to say everything to reach a public way, meaning to Lieutenant is it Lieutenant Point Road?
Lieutenant Island.
Island Road, okay, yeah. So that's why I thought there were about 10 or 12 abutters. But that was just a guesstimate.
Okay. John?
Yeah, this through you to Melissa. I didn't really feel that Janet's question was thoroughly answered. Is there a way to, for the concerned abutters or the association to do some kind of do a little bit of research to determine how much use this really would get before we start putting a whole lot of resources into this?
I mean, I could say it gets used currently. And there's a big wild shell fishery area out there. And this is the primary means of access for that. There's also a number of grants which utilize this access. In addition, the surrounding homeowners do use it for beach as well. And members of the public do as well. Mike?
Yeah, I can tell you that I go down there at high tide every once in a while, and there's a lot of people parked over there using the beach that are certainly not abutters on that road. So it's pretty widely used for both recreation and fishing and walking, that whole area. But I was just had a question about whether there's been any sort of contest in it being used today. Like, has anyone contested its use? Has this been brought? Has there been any attempt to stop people from using it? From anyone? Do we know that?
So I can say that right now, no. The thing is that, I mean, we'll get to this later in the meeting, is that the Agers have expressed their interest in selling the boathouse parcel to the town. And if the town doesn't necessarily act on it, who knows what the future might hold at some point,
Yeah.
and that, yeah.
Well, I always thought this was a public landing. That's what I assumed that it was. I didn't realize it was a private landing at the end of it because of the way it's so well worn. There's clear walking path from that parking spot out to the waterway. There's no signage there that says private property, I don't think.
Actually, I was out there today, Michael, and it does say private property, private road.
On Heron Point Road?
Pretty much. So there were a couple signs, like when you turn off to the right, and I don't remember exactly, but there were a couple of signs.
Okay, I guess I never noticed them. But it's always been my thought that, if the town owns a landing or the town owns access to the water, that they should also own the access to that point. So, what's the point of a public landing if you don't have access to it? That's all.
Okay. So I guess, so where's the board on this or should we, I don't know. I guess it'll come up when the warrant's presented for annual town meeting. I do think that a survey is needed, regardless of any direction that the town chooses to go in. That seems to be a prerequisite. So Helen?
Yeah, through you to Katie. So when I said Slate Associates, did our previous assessor's map, Yeah, except this is a very old subdivision and it was created and approved or is considered to be a subdivision under the, subdivision control law if it was.
Right.
Yeah, so the point is, whatever these lot lines are, is what exists for that subdivision. Isn't that true? I mean, it's been approved, it's been registered, right?
That would be true. I think this goes back to the mid 19th century.
Some of it, and some of it, yeah, it doesn't, but I think there are two different subdivisions on Lieutenant Island. I'm not quite sure about that, but they're both old. They both precede the subdivision control law.
Yes,
Yeah.
I believe that to be true.
So, and I'm open to learning this because I wouldn't know it now. But what would an additional survey of this way in this particular area show us? Given that the layout in that subdivision is what it is as approved and registered. In other words, what would an additional survey give us that we don't have already? Maybe we'll get something from that. I don't know.
Well, I think one issue is where is the road located vis-a-vis the so-called the layout as shown on the subdivision maps. Where is it actually on the ground? And I guess the question is, even if it is outside the bounds of the subdivision plan, what rights do people have to use it, even though it might be on land owned by Mass Audubon?
Okay, thank you.
Okay. All right. So on that, I'd like to move on. The disclosure of a conflict of interest from Melissa Yao. Has everybody had a chance to review this?
Ryan, are we moving into Omaha Road?
Not yet. We have disclosure of a conflict of interest, which the board has to accept or not accept. And then the town council will talk about where the town or where they are relative to communications and trying to establish contact with the MPS for land exchange.
Okay.
Okay.
So, Ryan, I would say I accept the conflict of interest notification. I don't mind her participating and giving us information, but I don't think she should be allowed to vote since it would affect her income.
Okay. Helen?
If we give her dispensation, she would be allowed to vote legally. I have to say that I'm going to ask Melissa one question for you, Ryan, and to have it stated in public. Melissa, are you there?
Yeah.
Okay, Melissa, do you understand, and I bet you do, but I'm asking this to you formally, that when you are serving on the committee, that you can only think of the town first. You can bring your expertise to your votes and your deliberations. But when you took the oath at town hall, you said you'd be working for the town. So any input and vote on that committee has to be for the town first.
So before you answer that, Melissa, Melissa did disclose a conflict of interest as a shellfisher when she was appointed to the committee as well, and we accepted that one. Just to make that clear, this is specific to
this matter.
Yep.
But Melissa, do you affirm or what is your answer to my question, please?
Yes, I understand.
Thank you. I would be happy to support your participation in whatever way, given that you understand that. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, so I move that the select board has reviewed the particular matter and the financial interest identified by Melissa Yao. The select board has determined that the financial interest is not so substantial as to be deemed likely to affect the integrity of the services to which the municipality may expect from the employee relative to Omaha Road.
Well, in this case, aren't we doing it about something? Oh, no, we're doing it about Omaha Road. Yes. Okay. Second. Helen, second.
Roll call vote.
So wait, we've just moved on to Omaha Road?
No, this is accepting the disclosure of the financial conflict of interest.
Right.
We have to do that before we do Omaha Road.
So why are you mentioning Omaha Road?
Because that's what this conflict of interest is.
It's not about this road too?
No, it's just about Omaha Road.
Okay. All right, Janet,
John, I.
Michael abstain.
Brian, I.
Helen, I.
Okay, motion carries 4-0 with one abstention. So on to an update from town council relative to your attempts to engage with National Park Service in relation to the land exchanges. And this is not to include any specific parcels, valuations, or negotiating strategies, if there are any.
Okay, well, on November 8th, there was a conference, a Zoom conference, including the Carol Ridley from the Friends of Herring River put it together. There were a number of people on that. And at that point, it became a lot clearer to me what the issues are relative to the land exchange and the potential need for the National Park Service properties totaling about 9.5 acres, 9.4 acres. And I was subsequent to that provided with I believe, the land exchange, PowerPoint that National Park Service put together. So I think at this point, we really need direction from the town in terms of what how the town wants to approach this. I mean, there's a procedure that National Park Service needs to go through in which they repeat every step 3 times. And that was, yeah. So I think, without getting into the parcels themselves, I think the thought is that, that National Park Service is maybe sort of overstepping, what it is asking for. But I think the town needs to determine and give us direction as to, which direct, what they'd like us to accomplish.
Okay, so you have been able to engage with them, because the last I heard, you were still struggling to
Yeah, well, yeah, in early November, I was, presented with these materials regarding the land exchange. And I think I have the name who's, and I can't remember it right now, at the National Park Service, someone to actually talk to. I'm sure someone knows his name.
Lauren McKean. Lauren?
Oh, right, Lauren McKean, that's one person, right? Yeah, and then, yeah.
Brian Carlstrom.
That's the other name,
Yeah.
correct. So I think that, this is a negotiation. And I think town representatives should be involved in it,
Okay,
just attorneys.
Helen?
Yeah, so at a public meeting, we had an excellent meeting with Brian Carlstrom and Lauren, and they gave us a wonderful, very complete, very clear list of all the steps that have to be gone through for the park. And where we are right now, and this was very clear in the meeting, was they've given us a wish list, which has no assumptions of our wanting to grant those wishes or not. But that's where we are right now. And I was, previous to that, the person that this select board sent to have a very kind of low key, without my having any authority beyond what the board would do as a group together, meetings about that. And then they took it from there.
No, we didn't.
You weren't, I don't think you were on the board yet, Ryan. But anyway, that's neither here nor there because it's not happening now, Ryan. We're farther along. So Katie, the thing that I have a question for you, you understand this is all about the Herring River project.
Yes.
Yes, and you know that. And the thing is that there's a very odd circumstance here, which is unusual for the park, which is the park and the town are all members, equal members of something called the Herring River Executive Council, which is termed an intergovernmental agency. So it's not town and park. It's a kind of internal dialogue about how to resolve this problem, which sends it out to the town making a decision and the park making a decision. Do you see what I mean? It's not a typical land swap that we might
Helen,
have in the park in the
that's
past.
getting into where we're gonna have to go into executive session
All
for
this was
this.
all discussed in public meeting, but my question to Katie is, does that relationship with them change the way in which we should be dealing with this? Maybe not. I don't know.
Well, the only thing I can say is they have their procedures, which would, apply in the event of a, arm's length transaction between two parties. And I guess your question to me is, will the National Park Service deviate from those procedures? And they're looking for an equivalent exchange, or they're being required. They see the way they present it, they're required to have an equivalent exchange. And your question is, are they somehow going to deviate from that procedure given the mutual objective that the two parties have? And I do recall several years ago when the discussions on High Toss Road, when I was involved with those with National Park Service, I do recall, the attorney there saying, we know that on the north side of High Toss Road, that's National Park Service land, and that because of the elevation of the road and the necessary grading that needs to occur, you are going to, the town will, infringe on National Park Service land, and we will look the other way. But that's one person talking. That's not the National Park Service itself talking. And that's sort of the way, I understand exactly what you're saying, I believe. And it appears now that that may not be their approach. So I can't answer what a federal agency is going to do. But the position that they're taking now is that they need to adhere to their procedures.
Yeah.
Janet?
So I know that the National Seashore is very much for the Herring River Restoration Project. Superintendent Carlstrom did say at one of our last meetings, probably the last one, we were kind of agreeing on the different pieces of land. he said that this could take a long time. I mean, this doesn't just get his approval. It's got to go down to Washington. It's got to go through the Department of the Interior. A lot of it's political and a lot of it, so we have a meeting with them in 2 weeks, an executive council meeting in 2 weeks. And certainly this could be brought up, but I wonder, is somebody worried that they're not doing or dragging their heels? It seems to me that it is moving along.
No, I just wanted to take this opportunity for a town council update the board on,
Okay, all right. Yeah,
and then we'll get into the, if we, a little bit later, we'll get into something if we have.
okay.
All right, any other questions at this point or comments? Okay, so on this, so we adjourn open session. So I move to enter executive session per MGL Chapter 30A, Section 6, Purpose 3, to discuss strategy respective to collective bargaining or litigation if an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining or litigating position of the public body, and the chair so declares relative to a briefing from town council on ongoing litigation. In MGL Chapter 30A, Section 21(6), to consider the purchase, exchange, lease, or value of real estate if the chair declares the open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the negotiating position of the public body relative to Lieutenant Island Boathouse parcel, Omaha Road, and other real property, and to re-enter open session.
Ellen, second. For the sake of discussion, Ryan, may I be recognized? I have a question for Katie about process. Nothing to do with any of the agenda items.
Okay.
Yeah, so Katie, through you, Ryan, the chair declares that public discussion may be detrimental. But when we vote to go into executive session, roll call vote, if the board does not vote to go into executive session, may we meet on it in open session at the same meeting, or do we have to repost?
Katie,
Carolyn, are you here?
yep.
I thought,
Sorry, I just need to unmute for a moment, sorry. If the will of the board is that you don't want to go into executive session because you don't think it warrants going into executive session, then it would have to have been put on the agenda as an open session discussion as well.
So it would have to be reposted if it hadn't been.
Yes.
Okay, so then I need to make one statement. Just very briefly, one of these agenda items, I feel it would be more detrimental to do in an executive session. And further, I don't feel it qualifies in the 4 ways in terms of exchange of real property, lease. What are the other 2? I forget, but purchase, exchange, lease, or value of real estate. And I would like very much for Omaha Road to be discussed in open session, the way it has been in the past, because it impacts so many people.
So
that's my statement, and people can vote however they want.
it hasn't been discussed in open session in the past. It was the last time we discussed it was on May 7th in executive session.
We discussed it before
So
that.
I'd like a roll call vote, please, on the motion.
And the motion's going into executive session, right?
Yep.
Coming out, going, okay.
Yep, that I read.
Yep, Janet, I.
John, did anyone second?
Yeah,
Helen did second the
Oh,
motion.
Okay.
Okay, Ryan, I.
Michael, I, and I'll be abstaining myself from
Yep.
part of the executive session once we're in there.
Helen, I,
Okay,
and I
so-
will be not participating on the Omaha Road one. Okay. Yeah, thanks for laughing. You know, not,
I mean, okay, I mean, it's,
that's what I'm saying.
Yep.
Just keep going. Thank you.
okay, so let's see. Can you lock the room, Rebecca?